This episode of We Are Libertarians is brought to you by Audible.com. Enjoy one free audiobook courtesy of We Are Libertarians. Choose from more than 100,000 audiobook titles, including works by Ron Paul, Walter Block, Murray Rothbard, and the Cato Institute. Audible.com also has audio of radio and TV programs and audio versions of magazines and newspapers. You can get the Audible app on any mobile device or download the audio to your computer. Go to audibletrial.com/WAL or head to WeareLibertarians.com and find the link to get one free month of Audible today. Welcome to We Are Libertarians for this week. I am your host, Chris Spangle, and joining me is co-host Greg Lenz.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Captain Reliable, as I like to call him. We might have Creighton on. Gina is in New Orleans for a quote-unquote vacation.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
When you don't have a job, and then you just go to New Orleans for a month.
That's very sexist. She's a full-time mom, Chris. Clearly you don't appreciate what she does.
You're right. I'm an a-hole. We are doing an experiment for this week. Given that it's just Greg and I'm sure we can handle it. Back in the early days of We Are Libertarians, it was common for Creighton and I to host alone, or for Galt and I to host alone. So I'm fairly certain that Greg and I can carry a full show by ourselves, but just to have a little bit of fun, we have put out the Skype phone number onto our social media so people can call in and ask questions, get in touch with us. So we don't know if anybody's going to call in or not, so we may be in the middle of a thought and take a phone call. But so we'll try it out. We'll experiment with it. If it works, if it actually turns out to be something that we enjoy, which I highly doubt, then we may try it again. Coming from a radio background, Greg, there's an old saying: "Love the listeners, hate the callers."
I believe that completely.
Right. So we'll see if that holds up true. But I know that the We Are Libertarians audience is incredibly intelligent and good-looking. So
we're gonna try this. Let's see if we get any calls. That would be a tad disappointing if we didn't get a single one.
I don't think it would be, because we literally just put it out right as we started on our Twitters and our Facebook machines. So
the
interwebs and the tubes. So we don't know what'll happen, but we'll see. A lot to talk about. Last week we weren't here. Let me explain what happened. We were lazy and we didn't want to do anything. And we knew that we would be discussing the same thing this week, and we just, sometimes it's nice to take a little bit of a break and not repeat the same show over and over and over. So we apologize if you missed us. We hope you got a chance to listen to Jeffrey Tucker with the show report. That was a great interview with Jeffrey Tucker. That should be mandatory listening for every new libertarian. I kind of knew of Jeffrey Tucker, but I had never talked to him before, and he's like instantly my top 5 favorite libertarians.
Oh yeah, he's got a ton of street cred.
Yeah, and actually this morning on the show report this week, we interviewed Noam Chomsky, your favorite.
He is a commie,
right?
And now it should be called the Commie Report,
right? Well, it does have a Democrat leading the charge.
I know, Ripley. Oh, I'm a libertarian. Let me go get on this communist Marxist.
Woodrow Wilson Ripley. That's my name for him.
I know. He is Machiavellian control freak.
We should say we're kidding or he'll get his feelings hurt.
I am not kidding. I hate him.
But no, it was a really interesting interview. He has a new book out about terrorism, and sort of the subtext is that we are a terrorist state. So deal with that as you will. And he also bashes libertarians a little bit, giving us the Rwanda argument for libertarians. But our guiding principle is that you say things that make you think a little bit. We want to stretch your bounds a little bit. So keep an open mind, listen to it. I thought it was really interesting, and his thoughts on the propaganda and linguistics, that was an especially interesting part.
Yeah, I mean, he makes very intelligent arguments. The problem with me is when he starts thinking that everybody owns everything collectively. His collectivism is my main concern with him.
He's a lot like James Neese, if you've heard him on one of our past programs. There is, at the center of it is communism. Basically, true communism, which it's communal living. All right, well, we've got our first phone call, and a 914 number. Hello, you're on We Are Libertarians.
Hi, this is Mark from New York, from Westchester, New York. How you guys doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Doing well. I wasn't expecting to go right through.
Yeah, you're like in the first 5 minutes of the show. So we're trying a little experiment, seeing how it works out. So go ahead with your question or your comment.
Well, I guess, first of all, I didn't realize it was live.
Yep, you're live.
No pressure, Mark. No pressure.
Dance monkey.
So, okay, well, I'll bypass the call screener. What are your all thoughts on, I'm sure you guys have been talking about it, but is Ted Cruz an example that entering into politics is a waste of time? Or is it an example that you can actually disrupt the system by using an old-fashioned filibuster to change the conversation?
See, and that's a perfect segue. And stick on the line, Mark, with this as we start into Ted Cruz, because that was obviously one of the bigger points of this week was Ted Cruz. To talk a little bit about what he did, in case you missed it, Ted Cruz talked for 21 hours. It was technically a long speech because legally he was not able to perform a filibuster and stop a cloture vote. And the technical reason is that once Harry Reid filed cloture, the vote had to take place by noon that day. So it would have been actually a felony on Cruz's part had he disrupted that vote. So he decided to filibuster and to talk about Obamacare for 20-some hours. And, in my opinion, I thought that even though it had no real technical value, okay, it was never really going to actually disrupt Obamacare. What it does is it gives Ted Cruz a platform to create a negative narrative in the media about Obamacare right before the exchanges open, which that will suppress the amount of people going into the exchanges. And that truly is the way that Obamacare can get killed, is by not having enough people entering into the exchanges, paying to basically, for young people like us and most of our listeners, basically to transfer your wealth to the older, sicker folks. Baby boomers again, ruining everything. And boomer hate.
Can't believe we're a young audience.
Yeah. And transferring that wealth from the young to the old, which that's essentially what all insurance is anyways. But so I think there was certainly a reason. What is your initial take? And then we'll answer Mark's question.
For him doing it?
Yeah.
I think it's one to raise his political identity. He's well known in the Republican Party, but for a lot of people, this was their first brush with Ted Cruz.
Right.
Especially Hispanic Americans. And I think that is who he, more so than Rubio, is going to appeal to. I think Marco Rubio comes off maybe a little more or less authentic than Ted Cruz does. A lot of people don't agree with him, but he is very passionate. He's extremely intelligent. His credentials are incredible. And I think he needed essentially a boost to get past Rand Paul or even to get into the discussion period.
Right. So, Mark, ask your question one more time because we were just getting ready to get to Ted Cruz when you called in. So give us your question once more.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned Marco Rubio, and that guy is a blowhard, in my opinion. I mean, he gets on the floor and he talks in the flowery language that we're used to hearing, and it's kind of meaningless. He's like the right's Obama.
He's the Manchurian GOP candidate.
Right. That Cruz, I think, is a little bit more. I think, first of all, and it's fine. It's self-serving, but it's fine. I mean, any politician who says that, like, oh, he's grandstanding, he's being self-serving, might as well just jump off a bridge because they're obviously being hypocritical because, well, why are you in the game?
Right.
Like,
it's sort of a lame thing to be mad at a politician for doing something political.
Right, exactly. Like you are by definition what it is you're claiming him to be. So and that's I accept that he is he has his own ambitions, and that's fine. What he did, I thought, was interesting is that when Obama ran, he said he was going to put this out in the open, have it aired on C-SPAN in terms of the debate on healthcare. Obviously, that did not occur. When John McCain went to the floor after Cruz's filibuster, he mentioned that, well, 2 years ago we went through this process and, we had 500 different amendments and we did all these things within our own committees. But that was literally behind closed doors. It was not being spoken about publicly. It was hard for the public to see. Whereas Ted Cruz put it all out there, and he made it an open exchange debate in which he took on, like after like standing for 17 hours, he was very well equipped to be able to continue discussion with someone like Dick Durbin, which if no one saw that exchange, it's worth watching.
I thought it was, by that point, I really thought, wow, this guy has serious oratorical skills. He's a great debater. He's a Harvard law grad.
Princeton undergrad.
Valedictorian. Yeah, very, very intelligent. I mean, if I were standing there at hour 19, I'd be like, Dick Durbin. I'd be asleep on my desk. I couldn't do it.
It was a huge risk, though, because if he only goes for 4 or 5 hours, he becomes a joke.
It's when you wake up that next morning and you go, he's still talking?
Yeah.
That's when I went. That's when I go, wow, okay, maybe this was legit. But to your question of the validity of it, does it show that he's changing the system from within, or does it just look like a joke and he's not effective and libertarians essentially shouldn't participate? And we're not calling Ted Cruz a libertarian, but we are a libertarian podcast, so don't
He's an
email
economic
me.
libertarian.
Right. Or should we just stay outside of the system and work from outside? Is that a fair representation of your original question?
Yeah, I think it's also very fair to point out that he definitely changed the trajectory of the week.
Sure.
Because it more likely could have been that the Senate would have voted for cloture much earlier in the week, and that there could have been a deal made between the House and the Senate by the end of the week.
All right, so
now we're almost all but guaranteed a shutdown.
Yeah,
which I think might be interesting to see how that plays out, because look, like the sequester, it may turn out people might start to realize that this isn't that big of a deal.
No, yeah, the shutdown isn't a shutdown. Even in '95, there were only 800,000 of 4.4 million that actually got furloughed.
We've had 19 shutdowns since the 70s, but let's answer his original question, Greg.
I think politically, it's going to be hard unless you do. Actually, I think it'll be a Ted Cruz that will have more of an effect than a Rand Paul if you're going to work within the system. I only say that because I think once you get the economic changes and you that should be the political pathway for libertarians, is sort of a step-by-step approach where you say, listen, this was popular, we did this. School vouchers, one policy after another that becomes popular, and then you start to set the American public starts to say, you know what, they have a lot of good ideas. Let's see where they want to do on the cultural things, on the drug war, on the things that have always scared people to pursue. Whether it works, I don't know. I actually think, though, the government shutdown is the best bet. Like you just said, with the sequester, the economy got better. And now if you have a government shutdown, and the only people that are going to sensationalize it are the mainstream media and the government, because they're going to be like, God, if people don't notice we're gone, what the hell do they need us for?
See, I think that it is... I think that hoping that a politician will change things is the wrong way to look at it. Ted Cruz is a politician, therefore Ted Cruz is a weasel. There are very few politicians who are willing to start with their principle and then go from there. I think Justin Amash, Ron Paul, those are legitimate examples. Rand Paul, I don't know. I think I would put him more in the Ron Paul category than in the weasel category. Ted Cruz, I want to see if there's a Republican president before I'm going to go in on this guy. And on some of the social issues, he's a conservative. He's not a libertarian.
Because we'd have been saying the same thing. Well, if Barack Obama was president before he was actually president, he would have been against the war. He wouldn't have gone into all these things, and all of a sudden gone, and all the Democrats getting lockstep.
Right, and I really am reserving that card for Rand Paul as well. But the change starts at the bottom, the grassroots. And there has been a lot of discussion about the war inside the GOP. And the fact is that the war inside of the GOP is a good thing. And the Democrats, if only the Occupy Wall Street could have started the same war in the Democratic Party, because this is good. Because this is an exchange of ideas. This is a dialogue that is taking place. And yes, it seems to be nasty. And no, I'm sorry, Senator Harkin, it's not pre-Civil War debates. Which it was in the National Journal. This is a good thing, and what small government, the small government side, what libertarians, what conservatives, old style conservatives, paleo conservatives, I guess you'd call them, Tea Party Republicans, what has taken place is it is now politically untenable for a politician to hold a view other than stick to the Constitution, defund Obamacare, check on the small government list. And the more, we saw this with Radley Balco here at IU. Radley Balco has a book called The Rise of the Warrior Cop, and talked about all the abuses. Basically, police departments now view their job as military. Well, the job of a military is to kill things, break things, and annihilate the enemy. The job of a police force is to keep the peace and protect rights. And you can't blur those lines at all. And part of our problem is we are now blurring those lines, and some of our police departments start to look at... They don't need tanks.
That was his point. I mean, I would recommend everyone in this audience buy his book.
Yeah, you can also go to wal-radio.com and go to the Raw Audio Politics National feed, download that podcast, and you can hear his entire presentation at IU the other night. And he said, someone asked how we can change it, and he said the only way to change that is to make it politically untenable, that it is unpopular to support a position other than returning police forces back to peacekeeping operations and respecters of rights. Same with Obamacare. The only politically tenable position on the right for many of these folks is absolute adherence to the Constitution. Okay? Whatever that means to whatever group you're talking about, okay? Because there is a lot of varieties of libertarians, of conservatives, of people on the right. And we'll go ahead and throw them in the right. Don't send... I know I work on the quiz.
On this issue.
Don't send me the tweets. I get it. But you always have to have disclaimers with libertarians.
I know.
So I think that it is a good thing that it is politically untenable to say one thing in your district and go to Washington and do another. I think that's good. That only happens. Ted Cruz only happens because he gets phone calls, he gets tweets, he gets, media figures like Glenn Beck breathing down his neck. Otherwise, he doesn't do what he does. He tried to kind of backpedal a week before that, and then the House Republicans said, "You're hanging us out to dry, man. What are you doing?" And he felt like he had to make good and make...
and he did, to his credit.
And make it right with some people that he might need for 2016. So I don't think that your change is going to come from politicians. Your change is going to come from a change in the behavior of voters and in the grassroots of the political parties.
I think, too, Mark, to answer your original question, a lot of people see it as either or. You either have to be for political change or you have to be more of like an agorist or a voluntarist like an Adam Kokesh. And I don't think there's any reason to look at it like that. I think everyone working together on different fronts is the only way to affect change. It doesn't need... There shouldn't be this dissension that exists within the libertarians of... Well, you're crazy if you think incrementalism can happen, change can happen politically. And then the other one, the more establishment person says, you're nuts if you think that Silk Road is the way to take down the government and Bitcoin. I think it's going to be a combination of those things that will guide us towards more liberty, and I'm really excited about it because I think all sects of the libertarianism are really starting to grow and get momentum. Even if some of them make you a little bit uncomfortable and it's hard to support them, maybe just don't mock them.
Yeah. What we have adapted the 11th commandment of Ronald Reagan. Try not to belittle and say bad things about other libertarians. And another one of our tenets here at We Are Libertarians is that if you're active, if you're doing something, if you're engaged, there is value in that. As long as it is peaceful and nonviolent and doesn't violate the NAP. So, Mark, what are your comments on what we've said?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the most important thing from I entered into libertarian thought maybe a year and a half ago, and it's been a really interesting journey to kind of climb out of the mold from where I was basically a Rush Limbaugh conservative talking head.
Megadittos.
And thank you.
Duddle up, duddle up, duddle up.
Oh, Rushbo. I think when I first got into it, I was on fire with all these ideas, and I was basically talking with the same ferociousness I had when I was a conservative. the more I've gotten used to where I am now, where I'm thinking about, the non-aggression principle, is that, first of all, I'm finally not seeing people in two different camps, conservative, liberal. It's really like an expansive chart, like what Walter Block talks about, where you can have someone on the left and you can have someone on the right. That doesn't really matter. What matters is where do they fall in terms of use of force. And that's just from a government perspective. But if you just talk to people and you're now coming at it from a much more just position of what it is, if you approach the person you're talking to, find out what it is they want to do in their life and what it is that's preventing them from being able to do that if they're not able to do it. And you find yourself agreeing more and more, or hearing more and more, or learning more and more about the other person instead of boxing them into a political ideology. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, and that's really fun to discover because you realize that you don't have to automatically box yourself into a certain group. You can't just be in two groups like the political system asks you to be in. It just doesn't work that way in real life. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that just as government is trying to achieve some sort of perfection on Earth, libertarianism will never achieve a utopia on Earth. It can only come about in small doses, but you're never going to fully ever get there. It's kind of like in Christianity, you're never going to be a perfect Christian because there was only one, and that would be Christ. Or in other religions, there may be a push to try to reach to some sort of perfectness, but you'll never get there because you're living on Earth. And so you almost have to accept the fact that we'll never see what it is we entirely want to see in our lifetime. So you take the small steps. If you can get someone to see 2% of where you're coming from, that's a small little drip, and that has an effect over a period of time. And I think through the internet with open sourcing, you're really seeing that take hold. I think this shutdown will be a lot different than maybe the one in 95, and that because people can see through the internet, can see through Twitter, Facebook, more information than they would have otherwise gotten in the 95 shutdown or the previous shutdowns before that, it's a little bit of a different experience. And like when you had Jeffrey Tucker on, there's something so beautiful about open sourcing because it's a spread of ideas in a way that we've never had before.
Well, that's Mark. You've been very well spoken, very intelligent,
excellent caller.
Yeah, and I said at the beginning, love the listener, hate the caller. I like you.
Yes, you are excellent, sir.
So
you are excellent.
Might have single-handedly made this a successful thing. Do you have a Twitter handle that you want to shout out so people can follow you?
I do not, but I'm on Facebook. I'm actually friends with you guys, so it's J Mark English. So you can find me through either Chris or Greg.
All right, very well. Thank you very much, Mark.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. On the line with us is Woodrow Ripley and Creighton Harrington.
Oh, my God.
Hey.
Wow.
Hello, comrade.
Hi, how are you doing, comrade?
Oh, very good, very good.
Good day, citizen. And Creighton, how are you doing?
Pretty good. What's up? You hear me?
Yep, can hear you. Go. You sound okay.
Okay, cool.
Good.
I'm using a different mic.
Yeah, turn it up a little bit though for us.
I can't. It's not that kind of mic.
Okay.
What kind of mic doesn't have volume control?
Is it Fisher Price?
No, dude. It's just one of those.
It's a kid's karaoke mic.
It's a headset mic.
Oh, I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
All right. So Ripley, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Breaking the number one rule of We're Libertarians, never let Ryan Ripley on these airwaves.
I am very upset. He was supposed to be our Matt Damon, and now that has been violated. I'm sorry, we don't have enough time for you, Ryan. We'll get to you next week.
Oh gosh, no, we were just.
I've broken through the glass ceiling. Now anything's possible.
We always knew you were a woman. No, we were teasing you politely earlier as we talked about Noam Chomsky, and how you were desperate to have him on the air. Finally, another left libertarian.
I know. It was like, it's probably a total man bro love. I don't even know. I don't know what do you call a mangasm.
Chomsky was fine. I mean, he definitely doesn't agree with us on everything, but the guy's brilliant. He's got a viewpoint. And if you don't look at the opposing views, then you don't understand your own views, right? I mean, you gotta measure and test, and I thought it was good.
And to be fair, I thought with the interview there was only one question that libertarians are going to get really mad about, which was the final one. So
I can't wait to listen to this.
Oh,
I have
good.
a feeling I'm going to have material to hammer Ripley with for quite some time.
No.
I have a question for Greg, though.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So, looks like Iran's next up in the perpetual war queue. I'm just wondering what the better argument for bombing Iran is. Is it that they're building a nuclear weapon, or is it it's full of Muslims?
You know what?
Which one is your excuse?
I think this is funny. I wouldn't actually bomb Iran. I don't know that I would bomb Iran.
We always tease Greg, and we got a comment, and I'd like to address it. Someone was very upset about the last one. Greg is certainly more militaristic than the rest of us.
I will follow the NAP until hit, and then I will end your civilization.
Right.
It's that simple. Peace through strength.
Right. And so, we allow all viewpoints, even if they are,
All I'm saying is don't hit me.
Right.
You don't hit me, you have nothing to worry about.
All right.
I mean, Radley Balco, we had that conversation with him at dinner, and I was like, I really was like, hey, he's probably a cop hater, until we really got to talk with him, and then we were talking about foreign policy, and he was like, well, yeah, just, if you hit me, I'm going to bomb the hell out of you and not help you reconstruct, and I was like, oh my gosh, I found another one.
That's when he fell in love.
I did. But no, Ripley, well, they're full of Muslims, and they're going after nukes.
Geez.
I'm a little bit scared. I won't say I'm not uneasy. I'm not going to say I'm not a little bit nervous, but we'll find out.
Terrible. Ripley, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's answered. We're heading to the zoo. I'm going to let you guys get back to your show. Have a good one, fellas.
All right.
Hey, we'll see you the 19th for sushi.
Sounds awesome. Can't wait.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Bye, guys.
Creighton, what's happening? How have you been? You actually got to. We'll go back to the Ted Cruz filibuster because I know you've got some things to say about it. You were actually in the. You went to the filibuster the other night, didn't you?
Yes, I went. I was in the gallery watching him make a ruckus. It was pretty cool though. I mean, obviously it wasn't as probably. I mean, I don't think it was as awesome as Rand's because it wasn't necessarily a real filibuster. Plus, there wasn't an issue that I think brings together a lot of people, from across the spectrum. But that being said, it was still pretty awesome. I mean, he did a good job of staying on topic the whole time, and only going off topic towards the end and to read his kid a bedtime story. But.
Which really killed him. I mean, people didn't give any kind of context to why he read Green Eggs and Ham. They just mocked him for it.
Yeah, oh, well, duh. I mean, everyone's mocking him for it, and honestly, I don't see why they... I mean, I can see why they would, because, the left is going to mock him because he's Ted Cruz and they hate him. The right's going to mock him because, he's...
He believes in accountability.
Yeah, he's grandstanding. But honestly... The people who love him right now are the base, and the base is who's important. And that's, the grassroots of the GOP base and the grassroots loved every single minute of it. They didn't understand or care that he couldn't possibly, it wasn't a real filibuster. He couldn't possibly win. They don't give a crap about all that. All they know is that Ted Cruz stood up for 21 hours and talked about how bad Obamacare was, pointed out every single problem with it, explained everything that's going wrong and all the hypocrisy about how Congress is giving exemptions, unions are getting exemptions, it's being postponed for political reasons. He stood up there for 21 hours and talked about that. So the base loved it. They ate it up. And that's what's important. No one's going to care, if, in 2 years, oh yeah, he made a fool of himself in that faux filibuster. They're not going to care. It's just adding to this wave of, I don't know, that it's adding to this wave of support for people like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and all this stuff going on in the Senate.
So
I love it. I think it's awesome.
So what? Give us some of the behind the scenes, because all we see on C-SPAN is those who are talking or asking a question. Like, what happens in these long sessions? First of all, what time period were you there? And also, are there members of Congress or the Senate, or how many people are in the gallery watching something like that?
So when I was there from about 8:30 till, or maybe 9-ish till about 11. Friend of mine was already there. He'd been there for like 4 hours. So you're not allowed to take any electronics into the onto the floor or into the room. That's a Senate rule. It's not like a security thing. It's just like one of the rules of the Senate is no one's allowed to have electronics. So if you're sitting in the gallery, you have to give your phones up. So, we were sitting there we didn't have any access to, coverage or anything. So it's just you and you're watching. That's it. You don't have any distractions. But, I mean, the gallery was relatively full. There were some empty spots, but it's not a big seating area anyway. The press gallery had like 2 or 3 people in it. Everything else was empty. But the floor had, a couple senators were still there. A couple Republican senators. A House member was there, I think, watching. But they had to have a Democratic senator there to be in the chair. So the Democratic senators kept switching out for who was sitting in the chair. And when I got there, Tim Kaine, I think's his name, from Virginia, he was there in the chair. And he was just sitting there staring down Ted Cruz, trying to I think he was trying to intimidate him, and it wasn't working because Ted Cruz just fed off of it and kept going even harder.
Yeah.
But he spent like a good 2 or 3 hours sitting there listening to Ted Cruz's, what he was talking about, and then you could tell that he was trying to formulate a debate, and then he got up and argued with him, and it was pretty cool.
Creighton, I was going to ask you, don't you think it's funny that Ted Cruz has been portrayed as a bully? And when I watched that man could not have a more, I guess, he doesn't have like a angry demeanor. He comes off very, I don't want to say soft-spoken, but he just doesn't come across like a bully. He's not gruff like a Chris Christie. And I was kind of wondering, why do you think that came about?
I don't know, because he doesn't play by the rules. To an extent, not by the rules in the sense of like he breaks Senate rules, but like I was reading an article about this the other day, and this isn't just Ted. This is like Rand and Mike Lee, like that whole like Liberty Caucus kind of type of senators. They don't respond to the same things that leadership has used to keep people in line, and this happens in the House just as much as it happens in the Senate. It used to be we'll give you if you can get on an important committee. You can have your name in important legislation and blah, 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 and that's what we'll do to get you. That's how they whip you. That's how they get you to vote with leadership. Well, people like, Rand and Ted and Justin Amash and Thomas Smith, they don't give 2 flying craps about that. So they're literally, there's nothing that leadership can do to make them in line. So so all these people come off as, just stopping the process. They're standing in the way. They're stopping legislation from getting passed. They're one people. They're fighting democracy because the majority. Blah blah. They're making a ruckus. And to the people who have been around, that's like the equivalent of being a bully. Like so, Ted Cruz, he'll come off. I mean, he's obviously I think very outspoken in his ideas. But they do this kind of stuff, and they think that it's a bully thing because he's up there basically standing in the way of stuff getting done. I mean, thank God for that. But I mean, that's the only explanation I have.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could remember a specific event because like I really hadn't paid much attention to Ted Cruz, and then all of a sudden like there was like he's this this guy from Texas that's arrogant and he's a bully. And literally every time I've seen him on a TV show, and then the last hour of his speech, he came off as so heartfelt, so sincere. Now, probably a lot of it for not having that same energy, he came off even more soft-spoken. But I was just like, man, to think this guy is a bully. I mean, compared to Chris Christie, he's a lamb.
As far as demeanor, there was an instance during the gun control debate where he kept asking Dianne Feinstein a bunch of questions about the Constitution and whether or not the Constitution allows people to prohibit or background checks as part of the Second Amendment. And it was obvious that he was being very condescending about it, which is awesome because Dianne Feinstein doesn't deserve any respect.
Creighton's a big fan of condescension.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be a libertarian if he was.
Yeah, but I mean, so stuff like that maybe where he is really smart, like he's memorized the Constitution. He can write it on it. Like if he walks up to a chalkboard, he can write the whole Constitution out for you because he memorized the whole thing. So he's a smart guy. He knows the Constitution well, and he gets up there, and I don't know. Maybe they're just not used to people. Maybe they're like, oh, we've moved past using the Constitution as an argument, and so he brings it back. And I don't know.
How dare he?
Yeah, I know. But I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of is that whenever he was arguing with Dianne Feinstein, he came off as kind of a douche to them because he was basically condescending to Dianne Feinstein about how she doesn't understand the Constitution, and she's like, I've read it, sir. I think she even may have quoted the Declaration of Independence instead of the Constitution or something.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about now. And then didn't he essentially say you should read it?
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah, okay, that's right. That was the event. That was the first time I ever paid attention to him.
Thank God. I love that whole exchange.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a great example. The gun control, the background checks. If it wasn't for Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, if it wasn't for them, that background check would have passed. They were the reason that it caused. They required a 60-vote majority to pass that bill instead of a simple majority. So it was because of those people doing their, essentially the same. They were trying the same tactic with this, but it wasn't going to work. But yeah, they were able to make it so you had to have a 60-vote threshold to pass that bill, and they couldn't get it. The Democrats didn't have the votes. So Ted Cruz was in on that, and that's probably something else that added to his bully-like demeanor to the left.
So what was we talked a little bit earlier about the point being that he is creating a negative narrative before the exchanges open. Plus, it also raises his profile a little bit, which, is a political move. A politician being a politician. Shocking. But what is the point of the filibuster if it wasn't actually a real filibuster, in your view?
I think it was to fire up the base, and I think it was... And I think for his personal politics, for his personal, his personal advancement of himself, I think it was, his constituents, one of the things he ran on was, he was going to stop Obamacare. So, I mean, this was really the most that he could do. They finally got this bill through the House. This was finally something to defund Obamacare that had teeth. And so he wasn't just going to sit there and, pretend that he couldn't do anything about it, so he was just going to go up there and talk for 21 hours. So in that, I think a lot of it was that. I think it was him personally trying to show his constituents that I am the guy that's going to keep taking the fight through Obamacare. I think on the same sense it was to fire up the base. Like I said, in that sense it worked excellently. But I think that there was probably a part of them that had a slim hope that they would be able to convince Harry Reid that any amendments to the continuing resolution that passed the House, any amendments that the Senate tried to make to that resolution would require a 60-vote majority. And that would have kept Harry Reid from stripping the language to defund Obamacare out of the bill. So probably never would have happened. It's not going to happen. But I think there might have been a slim hope on their part to have that be the case.
I think something... go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think something's really interesting happening, and Rand Paul definitely started it. But then Ted Cruz has, I think, taken this to the next level, and I think we're going to see more of this. When you're in the liberty movement and you're small government-minded, you get on these shows and you get, 30 seconds to try to fit your position in, and it always gets misconstrued. You never get to give context around everything. You just get portrayed as an idiot that doesn't understand or that hates government. And I'm thinking that the Liberty Caucus, like you said, is going to do this much more often for political messaging purposes. And it's very cathartic for the people who support them. And at the same time, it gives them a chance to say, listen, I'm not like John McCain, a wacko bird.
It's really one of the last long forms of argument left in our society today. You have this... It is amazing how we have so much access to information. We have so much access to technology. And you could do a podcast that goes 2 hours. But most of these guys don't, and they wouldn't because they wouldn't want to put it on tape. But the filibuster gives these politicians a chance to get their message out in a long-form argument. And everybody kind of covers it because it's a novelty. It's different. And for supporters of their points of view, I mean, gosh, the Rand Paul filibuster, like libertarians were dancing in the streets. It was like a block party online.
Oh yeah,
it was the Liberty Spring.
It was one of the best moments in my involvement since so far.
It was a great movement.
That day was one of the best days I've had as a political activist since I ever got involved. And I mean, sitting in the gallery watching Ted Cruz not do the same thing, but close to the same thing, and 21 hours is enormous.
Oh yeah, that was the incredible part. And did you ever hear anything about how did he just not go to the restroom, or did he do like Strom Thurmond?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I know they said Strom Thurmond, when he did his 24-hour filibuster or whatever, there was a door, like a closet, and he kept one foot on the floor and went into the closet and peed in a bucket.
Yeah, he'd pee in the cloakroom.
Yeah.
And apparently Ted Cruz did not go to the restroom at all. I mean, he just held it.
That is a strong man.
Yeah, unless he had a diaper or something.
He has a bladder for liberty.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the shutdown. So I can't tell what the government shutdown really is about. For some, it's about Obamacare and stopping Obamacare. For some, it's about not raising the debt ceiling. Really, either way, I look at it and go, okay, the math doesn't work. All right, you've got the president who can veto anything. You're not going to get 3/4 of the Senate to override the veto. You're not even going to get the House and the Senate to pass something that would kill Obamacare right now. The only way that you can win to actually repeal Obamacare is to win in the midterms big. And you're not going to win big in the midterms if you shut down the government and your side is blamed for it. And on the debt ceiling, we've had the argument about the debt ceiling in past shows, and we can kind of go over that again here. But the debt ceiling is going to end up getting passed. I thought the president actually made a decent case for once on why he's not going to negotiate, and the government can't go into default, and we're not going to be beholden to these American terrorists, even though he's talking to an actual terrorist on the phone, which is weird. But
besides the fact,
the debt ceiling, you got to pay for your bills. They're going to rack up more debt. That's just the way it is. And so you've got to just elect more people. So I don't really understand the purpose of the government shutdown. I don't look at it and support it or not support it either way. To me, it makes no difference, really. I just like chaos. Let's start with Greg here. What is the purpose of the shutdown, and do you agree with it?
The purpose of the shutdown, if you're John Boehner or you're in the House or Congress as a Republican, is to get a control on future spending. It can't be about current spending because right now there's no way of closing our deficit. But we have to really get a strong focus on future entitlement spending, reforms anywhere you can get. And I think they are so sick of the president thinking he's just going to get his way, because for the last debt ceiling, they got $39 billion in cuts that weren't actual cuts.
Right.
I mean, it's time to get serious reform if you want to be taken, as someone that wants small government. You can't go back to your district and say, well, I got $39 billion in fake cuts over the next 45 years. Well, good job. I appreciate it. But also, it's not a shutdown. They're only going to furlough like 800,000, 900,000 at most. We're still going to have essential services. I just think it's funny that the people who get furloughed are called non-essential government employees. In my opinion, if they're non-essential, what the hell do we have them for? And I'm sick of the messaging on this because the media is going to sensationalize it. The federal government's going to act like it's some kind of catastrophe, and nothing could be further from the truth. The best thing that could happen is it gets shut down and people come around like, this isn't so bad.
Mark Levin actually was on Jake Tapper yesterday, and so these are his facts, so take it with a grain of salt. There's been 19 shutdowns since the 70s, several over the Reagan administration, and checks still go out on time, soldiers still get their paycheck, and all the stuff that they scare you about still continues to happen despite they say that it's not going to happen. So Creighton, I mean, do you support a government shutdown? What is the point of it? Do you think it's going to help or hurt Republicans?
I think it has the potential to hurt Republicans. I mean, I don't like it, but having the messaging is going to be that it's going to hurt Republicans, and I don't necessarily care, I guess, in that sense, but I don't want more Democrats to win in 2014. I want more of the liberty kind of style Republicans to win in the Senate, and I know that the average American voter doesn't discern the difference between a Republican and a liberty Republican. So the liberty Republicans will take just as much of a hit if the Republican Party gets blamed as the John McCain style ones. So if it was only John McCain style Republicans that would take the messaging hit, I'd be perfectly fine with it. Let's shut the government down. But it's not. So in that sense, I kind of have to, bite my tongue and say that I don't necessarily like the idea of a government shutdown, not because it will it'll actually cause the government to stop working or something, but because the messaging game is so hard to win there. I think if it does end up shutting down, then I think a lot of people might, the fact that Social Security checks will go out and stuff because they're not even a part of this continuing resolution. It's only like national parks and stuff like that. I mean, I think once people realize that their Social Security checks will still be in the mail and Medicare and Medicaid, all that stuff still taken care of, I think that the Russells will die down a little bit, and then, there might be a chance to, actually have a debate there. But honestly, I just don't think that there's a chance for the Republicans to win from a political standpoint. Now, from a standpoint of trying to actually get something done with teeth, I do think there is a possibility that Republicans could get something there. Like Greg said, last time we had this big old debate, we got a cut to increase in spending. So, I mean, obviously that's not as much as we want, but it's these moments where they actually can, say, if you're not being the minority party in Washington, they can actually say, if you're not going to listen to us on this, then we're going to have to do something drastic.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it'll work.
Creighton, if you don't mind muting your mic for me real quick. Let's give our final thoughts on you don't have anything on the debt?
I was just going to say, I think it'd be great politics if John Boehner and the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans held a press conference and said, this isn't a shutdown. The government is still going to operate. If there is a person in America who is supposed to be getting a check that isn't going to get it when we shut down the government, I'll write it to you personally.
Yeah. So, and he probably could. So I think from our perspective, I know Republicans and Democrats get all worked up over these government shutdowns. Libertarians, not as much. We just kind of go, finally, good. Well, we have another call, and we have a call from my friend and wall contributor, Phyllis Klosinski. Phyllis, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. It's nice today.
Yes, it is. It's beautiful out. And you live in Brown County, which is one of the most beautiful spots in Indiana.
Well, thank you.
So you're probably getting the leaves are starting to change down there, aren't they?
And we certainly have a lot on the ground because we've had a lot of dry weather.
Oh, lucky you. So, well, we'll have to get you on the podcast. I'd love to have you on the podcast someday soon in a formal way to hear your story a little bit. So maybe it'll be a good excuse for us to drive down to Brown County. So
that might work.
Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do. I hadn't been listening, but I understand that you were talking mostly national, but I'd like to get us back to Indiana because I'm sure that you know, and so do the other gentlemen there, that Indiana is a major concern for the violation of individual rights. And I would like to know what all of you consider to be the primary threat to the sovereignty of our individual rights.
The primary threat to our individual sovereignty, our individual rights and sovereignty. Correct. Okay. I would say that the number one threat is that we don't fully understand our individual rights and our own sovereignty, and things like the castle doctrine, that your home is your castle. I think it's just a lack of awareness. I think that's got to be the biggest threat, and I don't think that's a cop-out answer. I think there are so many different problems. If you look on the national, the state, the local levels, our rights and our notion of individual rights and property rights are constantly under assault from every aspect. Everything from education to agriculture. Basically, if there's a department for it, your rights are under attack. And we have to be better at understanding when and how and why our rights are under attack and what we can do about it. And I think, in your case, and I've talked to you before, briefly, Phyllis Kozinski and her husband Mike have gone all the way, you've almost gone all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court.
Well, we did go to the Supreme Court twice.
Okay, twice. Because it was the Sweetwater Conservancy District came in without regard to their property or individual rights, came in and made them dig up their septic system and just forced them to do it. And Phyllis fought back all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court twice. Now, Phyllis was intelligent enough and understood her rights enough to know that what was going on was wrong. Whereas her neighbors, if they had joined together with her, they could have stopped this, but none of them saw the problem with it. None of them saw that being forced to spend money for something that isn't an issue is a problem. And had they understood their rights, had they cared enough, had they not been complacent, something like this could have been stopped. And so I think that's the number one issue, is that we've completely lost the mindset of individual liberty, and it's been completely eroded. And when you try to talk about these sorts of things, you saw it with Ted Cruz. There's a soft censorship that takes place. It's anytime anybody stands up for our points of view or segments of our points of view, they're met with derision, dismissiveness, condescension, mocking, even by people who supposedly are small government believers. And so I think you combine it with a lack of understanding and then that soft censorship of just sit down, shut up, be quiet. I think that's our biggest threat. And you may be looking for a specific issue, and hopefully the other two can kind of point out something more specific. But in my view, it's a lack of awareness.
I do. I think it's engagement for sure. A lot of it, I think, depends on people not knowing their rights, like Chris said. But then I don't know, and I don't know. I'm not blaming solely public schools. I'm not blaming any group or educators, but people don't understand what their rights are and how you have them. You have your rights to the extent you can defend them. Whether you can use those rights and stand up for those rights is directly tied to your ability to actually defend those rights, whether it be physically by, like Chris said, the Castle Doctrine, or whether it be legally, whether you have the existing laws in place that allow you to seek retribution for infringements on those rights. And then the other thing I think it really is, well, you know what? I'm going to let Creighton, because I'm going to still toss that around in my head a little bit. But I think the biggest thing is your ability to defend those rights and having the avenues to pursue retribution.
Having reliable support networks.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it, too, is that we are independent-minded, we are independent people, and we don't often support each other the way we need to.
Yeah, we don't collectivize as individuals.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think the biggest threat, though, nationally, and that is even here in Indiana, is the healthcare law. Once they
yes.
I really do. Once they create a database of everyone's personal information, of your health information, it'll be easily hacked, I'm positive. On top of that, once you socialize costs, you can start to control behavior, and it is a trap door that, now I'm not saying that the President Obama or the current government would do anything like that, but I do think down the road it opens the door for huge tyranny.
It is a huge, huge tool for any state. We'll use the broad term, the state, to use against their citizens. When you have access to information about their very bodies, that's one of the, if not the most fundamental question when dealing with the government. Do you own your own body?
Well, that's the issue, and I believe you gentlemen may be aware that I've written several articles that you've even published about Obamacare.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I have probably done a little more reading than the average individual has on these multi-thousand-page bills. And the issue that we have here is you have agencies in charge which have absolutely no accountability to the American public whatsoever. They're operating under administrative orders, the IRS and Health and Human Services. And as such, they are drafting and passing rules and regulations regarding Obamacare that most of the people have absolutely no idea is going on. And what's happening is Medicare has a slight indication of this over the years because I've had to help my parents with their Medicare things. And what it is Medicare decides what kind of treatment they will pay for under Medicare. And they only pay 80% of that cost, which is why you have to have supplemental. But the point is Medicare has already determined what type of care a person can receive. Now, this is going to go into, and it already has been, placed into Obamacare. There are programs in there for wellness programs. They're going to control your BMI index, your smoking, your drinking, any of your behavior because it is detrimental to them because they have to pay the premiums and you're causing medical expenses. Now, I discussed this with several people when we went for a medical exam, and they were outraged that I was upset about Obamacare because this means everybody's going to get free medical care. And they do not understand that once the government takes over your medical care, they will determine what you can get, where you can get it, and your behavior will have a great deal to depend upon the amount of premium that you pay. That's already in a lot of these administrative laws that have been passed by the IRS and Health and Human Services. And one of the things that really concerns me the most is the fact that what they are trying to do is have your doctor state whenever someone becomes depressed and goes on medication that they could consider would alter their mental ability, to use that to remove any right that you have to keep and bear firearms. Now, for some reason, this does not bother my neighbors. Can anyone please explain this to me? Why do the public not see what's going on?
You've experienced it. Don't rock the boat. You know, it's why are you rocking the boat? And it sounds like a fantasy that, you know, how many people are prescribed ADHD medicine or serotonin reuptake?
A lot more than you would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, people who are taking things like Paxil and Prozac.
There you go.
Those people are not going to get guns. Those people are not going to get gun licenses. And you now are building a database for the government to look into your health records to determine you are basically the Obama healthcare law fundamentally, whether now or down the road, you're giving over the ownership of your body to the state. And that is the exact opposite of the founding of this country. It's an affront to libertarians' mindsets. So it may be great that you are getting health insurance for $50 a month less, but what about the larger ramifications of giving up your very basic human rights, the self-determination, self-ownership? That's gone with Obamacare, and those of us in this room and on this phone call that don't agree with that are forced by the government to participate in that system.
Correct, or you will be fined, and it will be coming through the IRS right out of your paychecks. You're not going to have any way to stop it.
No, that's why people love to use government. It forces you to do something with the threat of jail or financial ruin, and they use the stick and the carrot to manipulate your behavior, and both parties participate in it. So we don't want to devise a government that allows other people to force you to do something that is an affront to your personal values.
And the real danger is, so we've got, everybody has, an FBI file. They know anything criminally wrong you've done. NSA has all your personal life. Now they've got all your health data. And if you
all your financial records at the IRS.
If you don't think all that stuff's going to be intertwined.
It's already there. Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
It may not be intertwined yet, but at a certain point it will be under the guise of efficiency.
And with the technology and the coming singularity, I mean, if you study the works of Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurist, the head futurist at Google, he thinks that in the next 20 years we will see the elimination of medicine as we know it. and they will then be able to upload your entire mind to the cloud. And they will use these little nanobots that will go in and fix everything that is wrong with you. So all your thoughts...
Well, they better have a lot of fixing for me.
Yes. They're going to need, it's going to look like a Bender-sized robot from Futurama that needs to fix my head. But they'll be able to upload your mind, so your mind, your personality, your thoughts, your memories will be... they'll last forever. You'll be infinite. And if you have issues, if you have heart problems, they'll have certain little bots that they can put into your bloodstream that can fix you. Well, when you've got that kind of technology, you've got Google and Apple and all these companies that are so intertwined with the government and cooperate with the government, we can get him to do this certain behavior by giving him this certain bot. And it won't be, strapping you to a table, forcing you to take this sort of behavior. They'll persuade you. They'll convince you. They'll coerce you that, you have this problem, and it would really be best for you if you fix this by doing this. People like Maya Axton don't stand a chance. Those type of people will not exist. And I don't mean transgender people. I mean people who are wildly independent that are completely anarchist, anti-state, anti-authority, anti-power. That will not exist.
No. Any resistance will be eliminated.
Right. Because what is best for you? And maybe we sound absolutely nuts. Maybe we do, but...
Yeah, I mean...
Hopefully you think there's some value in what we're saying.
I think that would be...
You have a right to be absolutely nuts, so long as you don't impose it upon anybody else. You have that right. You have the right to object.
Unfortunately, people like Harry Reid are absolutely nuts, and they're forcing us into his insanity.
I do think, though, it's tough, and this is the devastating argument for me, for saying that, well, they tell you how much of a premium you can pay and on your behavior. Well, right now, the private market does that. As a smoker, if you go your premiums are higher. So your behavior already affects it, and that's what they always throw back in our face.
Right.
Is, well, you're already being that, But the point is, yes, but I can also choose to opt out of the system. And if you do, they'd say, well, you're going to use healthcare at a certain point. Well, that just means that they're being prevented. There's market solutions being prevented. If the government would get out of healthcare, and I mean, granted, everything's going to have a little, well, it doesn't have to, but everything will have a little bit of regulation. And they'd let people sell across state lines. They let them do their own pricing. You would see an absolute plummet in cost. Absolute plummet in cost, comparable to what's happened in plastic surgery, LASIK. The cost of those procedures has plummeted. Why is it that the rest of healthcare, it only seems to go up and up and up?
And they say, if you don't have health insurance, then I have to pay for you. We don't believe in that system either. We don't believe that the state or the federal government or the local governments should be paying for people who aren't seeking health care. So,
yeah, a financing system. An entrepreneur would create a financing system where, if you didn't have health care, when you went in, you had to have a procedure. It was an emergency. It would be like taking out a mortgage, and you would have to pay it back.
So I don't know if Creighton wants to jump in here. He may have jumped off the top of his roof by now. But Phyllis, how do we fix it? I mean, how do you get people engaged and make them realize that these things are important, because these are questions of ownership of your own body, of who is controlling your behavior, you or someone else. I mean, how do you engage people?
Chris, is this Greg?
It is.
The other gentleman that's there?
Yeah. Hey, Phyllis, how are you?
I've never met you. Okay, hi, Greg. To be honest with you, this is a battle that I've been going on for 20 years now. And to answer your question, I don't know. The problem is, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. And it's the same way with people. They perceive government as basically God. They're getting something for nothing, when in fact they don't realize that they're paying for it through their taxation and their removal of their individual right to choose something and their individual determination, even if it's a wrong determination, to be punished for that determination because they've harmed someone else. The concept of right and wrong appears to be the issue, and responsibility. I, as a libertarian, or I consider myself, many people don't, they consider I'm completely off the wall,
Hey,
believe
welcome to
that
the
if
club.
I make a choice and it's a wrong choice, then I have to pay for it myself. I have no problem with doing that. That's a responsibility I accept for making that choice. Yet others don't see that I should have a right to do that when it's something that they perceive could harm them or has nothing to do. It's like the medical expenses. We've got a health savings account and a high medical deductible. Anything less than the deductible, which is $30,000, we have to pay out of pocket. We have accepted that and we pay it. That's our choice. Other people don't see that if you run up a bill, regardless if it's health care, a phone bill, entertainment, whatever it is, you, the individual, have chosen to run that bill up, and you, the individual, shall pay for it, not someone else. That's the concept I cannot get through to people. It's like a mortgage. They'll go out and buy a $200,000 house, and they can only afford a $150,000 house because they perceive that these payments are going to be able to be made on a future income that they have no guarantee of. It's the concept of right and wrong and knowing what your limits are that I think is the problem. And today's people, and I don't know if it's the education, I don't know if it's the lifestyle, what it is, can't get past that concept that you, the individual, are responsible for your decisions. So how to fix it? I don't know, guys. You tell me.
I think the right tactic to start this...
They'll start a podcast.
I think the right tactic to start the discussion going in the direction against, for instance, the healthcare law is to go after a constitutional amendment for a right to privacy. I think that's something that would be incredibly popular in this day and age where the world is essentially all online. I think that's the kind of thing I would hope a Rand Paul or a Gary Johnson, someone like that, would get behind that. It would really expose the authoritarians versus the libertarians, the people who actually did love liberty. And I think that would be a good way to turn the conversation. I mean, essentially, you can't win the Obamacare argument because right now we're outnumbered and we probably always will be. There'll always be more takers than makers. So I don't know if it's realistic.
Because there are more receivers than there are providers.
Exactly. So I don't know if it's realistic to sit here and say that we're great enough educators and salesmen that we can get people to believe in, self-reliance. I wish I thought that. Yeah.
No way.
But I think there's a way to do it through privacy. You make this whole debate about privacy. You say, listen, we have all your data. You're not protected whatsoever. And once a few breaches happen, you use that to politically capitalize on the privacy argument. Get a constitutional amendment for that, then say, well, listen, all this data is still here. It exists for you. Then that same politician goes out there and says, we're going to give you essentially the ability to sue the government for every infraction on your data. And when you make the disincentive for the government so high, I think eventually they would purge themselves of the ability to collect that data. And that's how you could get out of these types of socialized programs.
Okay, then I have a suggestion for you, Greg. Take your idea to your Indiana senator and representative and get it put into the Indiana Constitution first.
Okay. All right. I don't think either one of them will like me.
Sovereignty should hold against federal law, and you know it.
Phyllis, have you heard about Mark Levin's new book, The Liberty Amendments? I'm not a follower of Mark Levin, but he's written a book with several, I think 11 new amendments to the Constitution, and his point is that trying to fix the federal government through Congress is pointless at this point. So we ought to start at the state levels.
There you go.
We get constitutionalists elected to the state legislatures. Then we have a constitutional convention to put in these 11 amendments. Some of them I agree on, some of them I don't. And that's how we will fix the federal government. And, I always have said, all right, well, we have a constitutional convention, you open it up, you never know what you're going to get. And his argument was, well, if let's say you're worried about the Second Amendment going away, Do you think you're going to get 13 states that will agree with that? 2/3 of the states are not going to agree to get rid of certain portions or any of the Constitution currently. I don't know. It's a gamble that you'd have to take. But I did agree with the overall point that trying to fix the federal government through Congress is much tougher, maybe a fruitless task compared to fixing it at the state level.
Well, you have to start here. If the state exercises its obligation to sovereignty, and it does have that obligation if you read the state constitution, it has that obligation to us as the citizens within its borders to protect us from federal intrusion. Get that started. That's where we need to start it, right there. If enough states do that, the federal government's power that has grabbed, which it has no authority for, will cease to exist. But we have to start closer to home where we can reach the people. You're not going to reach the people in D.C.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Phyllis. It's great to talk to you. If you want to read any of Phyllis's stuff, go to wearelibertarians.com, and on the menu bar, we've got a pull down for our authors. And check out Phyllis's commentary there. She's fantastic. Obviously, she gets it. And really glad that you called in. It was a great discussion.
Nice meeting you, Phyllis.
Okay, nice meeting you too.
All right. Thanks, Phyllis.
Okay, have a great day.
Bye-bye. Oh, I accidentally cut her off. So really like Phyllis a lot. She's fantastic. Creighton, are you still there? Creighton has apparently... Yeah?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hey, I want to get your take on Iran, okay? Let's talk briefly about Iran. All right. So yesterday we have Obama come out and have a press conference. He begins the press conference by saying, the president of Iran called me on the phone, which that has not happened since the 70s, that the two leaders of Iran and America have talked. That's it was sort of a stunning fact that they haven't talked, the heads of state. So they had a conversation, and they're opening a dialogue because discussion is good. And then he goes on to talk about how he's not having a conversation with John Boehner because they're terrorists. The head of Iran is actually a legitimate terrorist. He is Rouhani, for all of his, moderation, I guess you'd say. They are still supporters of Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization. They carried out a terrorist attack. Iran personally paid and orchestrated a terrorist attack in Africa. I forget the country.
Mali,
like in the last year or so. And they continued to fund, Syria and their chemical weapons programs. They're still continuing to develop nuclear weapons. Like, the only thing that's really changed from now and this time last year when Ahmadinejad was president is that they're being nice to us now. Is there a moral equivalency to, and I ask you, Creighton, first, is there a moral equivalency to saying, well, he will negotiate with Iran and actual terrorists versus not negotiating with John Boehner and the Republicans on things like the debt ceiling? Like, is that a fair argument to make?
I think it's fair if he's going to call Republicans a bunch of terrorists. I mean, if he's going to go out of his way to say that, Republicans are terrorists because they're doing things that they don't like what I'm doing, so they're trying to stop it. That's just childish. And if he's going to go that route, then when he actually is, an out-faced hypocrite, which is like every single day, then people need to call him out on it. I think that's a fair argument to make. I mean, it's like, it is. I mean, you're starting a negotiation with an actual terrorist. An actual guy who, in some way or another, is at least indirectly responsible for, terrorist activities. And that's okay. That makes you some great leader, some tempered statesman trying to avoid conflict or something, whatever messaging he's trying to do to save himself from his Syria screw-up. And then at the same time, the Speaker of the freaking House of Representatives gets absolutely no dialogue and discussion because they really don't like a law that you spearheaded. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just another example of the fact that Obama was not ready to be president.
He's so childish. I mean, he is absolutely
he's just
an
a
infant.
bad leader. Like, that's something like I don't know. I haven't been on the podcast a while, and stuff that I've just been just becoming more clear as you come out here and you get even more submerged in this world where you live and breathe politics. You come to understand that President Obama is just a bad leader. He's arrogant. I always thought maybe he was just like dumb or something. He's arrogant. He just doesn't know what he's doing. And, I can understand that the Democrats want to support the guy because he's their president and stuff. But, I mean, there's got to be a point where you're just like, okay, we admit it, this guy just wasn't very good.
No, he's bad at politics. He's bad at essentially consensus building. He doesn't necessarily need to get agreement and bipartisanship, but he can't even get a consensus a lot of times with his own party.
Yeah, he can't even, like, on things when there's a trend. Like, I remember after the Navy Yard shooting, the redheaded chick that works for New York Times.
Maureen Dowd, Moto.
Maureen freaking Dowd did not like Obama after that.
Oh, yeah.
Maureen freaking Dowd. The girl who called Joe Wilson, the guy who said "you lie" to Obama a few years ago, she called him a racist. She said he meant "you lie, boy." I mean, she's that kind of liberal.
Yeah.
That's the type of liberal she is. Even she doesn't like Obama after the Navy Yard shooting because of his response. I mean, when you have, the people who are the mouth of your, like, ideological base, not just like the middle of the road Democrats, but like the hardcore Democrats, the left. They are like one of the mouthpieces of the left. If you lose them because you just screw up and you don't know what you're doing, I mean, people just need a reality check. The Democratic Party just needs a reality check. Who is this guy that you think is a
demigod
to represent your values? I mean, it doesn't even matter whether or not I disagree with his values or anything. Do you want this man who is so bad at being president, not from a perspective of like I just disagree with what he's trying to do as president, but just his being a leader? Do you want this guy to represent your values? And I don't know. I think there's I honestly, the only thing I can hope is that Obama keeps screwing up the way he is. He turns off the base even more. That way in 2014, they don't have a get out the vote program.
You're really getting Greg hot over here. I don't know if there's a moral equivalency between comparing Boehner. I mean, more dialogue is always better, and compromise is usually good. Rouhani and Iran, whatever averts war and possibly will stop their nuclear weapons program, and secondly, which stops them from funneling money to terrorist organizations, I'm for. I don't think force is going to do that. I don't think that intervening militarily in Iran is any kind of a good idea in any single possible way. It's an absolute freaking disaster. I believe in national sovereignty. They have a right to develop a nuclear program, I guess. I believe in nuclear power, but I don't believe in nuclear weapons at all. I think it's horrific, but I don't necessarily believe that they are doing this for nuclear power. They sit on, as Romney said yesterday, they sit on an entire lake of oil. What do they need nuclear power for?
He's a sharp guy.
Yeah. Rouhani is the former negotiator for Iran. He was the one that negotiated the last time that the West was negotiating with Iran about their nuclear power program. He was the one negotiating with the Europeans, and he is the one that said, afterwards, he bragged that while he was the one that achieved the peace with the West, it got the heat off of them, and that's when they were able to make the best progress in their nuclear program, start the centrifuges. So I don't necessarily think that he is a trustworthy guy. But I do agree that he is certainly better than Ahmadinejad, who seemed like a bit of a loon. This guy his administration is at least trying to be a little more transparent and open. Even things like positive signs like tweeting Happy Rosh Hashanah. I think that's great. I mean, opening dialogue is a good thing. That is exactly what we ought to be doing. Creating dialogue and unleashing the power of free markets is the best way to find peace in the world, not with military strength. And I'm sorry if people in the last episode misunderstood what we were saying, because that is the libertarian point of view on any military exercise. Might doesn't make right. You know, we
No, it's just might makes the rule sometimes.
Right. So we believe that opening dialogue with Iran is good, just as opening dialogue with the Republicans. I can understand the president's point of view that it's just foolish to want to default on loans in the United States. I understand that, but they have a different point of view. Why not have consensus? Why not reach a common point of view? I mean, just shutting down the discussion, not opening dialogue, just seems foolish to me on the national front too. So.
I think he's so arrogant. I mean, and it's not like John Boehner is a Tea Partier. He is not. I mean, he's not an Amash. He's not a Ted Cruz. He is not that adherent to his principles like those gentlemen are. So he's able to be negotiated with. When they were trying to do reform before they almost had the grand bargain done, and apparently Boehner had gone way out on a limb with raising taxes, and unfortunately the president just became so arrogant. He kept pushing and pushing and pushing, even with Boehner out on a limb, that Boehner said, nope, I'm not returning your calls. And it ended up being in a huge mess, and the Republicans didn't end up getting anything out of it, too, with those fake cuts. As far as the president, though, in Iran goes, this is a ploy, in my opinion, a ploy by their leaders. They know his big hot button after he gets out of office is going to be to end nuclear proliferation. So they see that, and they say, listen, if we open up dialogue, we can make it look like we are willing to put restrictions on our pursuit of nuclear energy. And he is so committed to this cause that we'll be able to use him to end the sanctions on our economy. Now, that can be dangerous because as their economy opens up, they will have more and more money to funnel to the terrorist organizations they support. And to think that there's any way of stopping that and stopping those cash infusions to those organizations is impossible. All you'll do is make it go underground. They will always be funneling money to those terrorist organizations. And Rouhani is the same guy that I believe it was McFarland. That was what Chris was referring to when they first had that dialogue about 30 years ago. This was the guy he met with. And when they had their presidential elections, the mullahs essentially vet everyone, and if you are not ideologically sound, you are not allowed to run. So you have to be incredibly fundamental and believe exactly like they do, because 99% of the people who run and would like to pursue the presidency are denied because they don't have strict enough views. So this guy is in the top 1% of mindset with the Islamic leaders of Iran. So it's not like all of a sudden he's had a change of heart. What he's really looking to do is he knows this is a hot button for the president. He knows it can end some sanctions so that he can get the economy turned around, which will in fact help his citizenry, because that is where they lose the most support, are these crippling economic sanctions, which is, causing the rise of the Green Party in Iran, which is the moderate change party. If you turn the economy around, you don't have these uprisings anymore, and you can talk about what a great leader you are and how your reforms have been wonderful. You have more money to support the terrorist organizations, and on top of that, you make the president look like a fool by playing cat and mouse about ending nuclear proliferation when you will not.
So what's the solution? I mean, it's I agree with your assessment, and here is the challenge of how holding a non-interventionist foreign policy. You clearly have a government in Iran that is hostile to America. You know that the worst thing you can do is try military intervention. Non-interventionists also believe that sanctions, financial sanctions, are an act of war as well and don't work, because all that does is radicalized. When people go hungry, they turn to a strong man. And they turn to the worst possible choice because they're hungry.
But they already have a strong man.
Right.
Their uprising are the moderates. They're the youth, that Green Party.
Sure. I understand that. So what do you do in this situation? And I, as always, when we ask Greg foreign policy questions, he's the former Republican, so he's not coming at it from the Noam Chomsky point of view. But how do, and I'd ask Creighton this as well, I mean, how do we deal with these regimes that are clearly anti-American for good reason, because we have a 50, 60-year history of screwing up their government by intervening? How do we roll that back? How do we fix the situation?
See, I actually think and this is something this president would be incapable of because of his beliefs, I'd say, go get your nukes. We want you to develop them, but we're going to leave every economic sanction in place, because the strategy should be to get rid of the mullahs, the imams, all the clerical leaders in Iran. That should be who you want out of power, and I think that is what promotes the most freedom over there. And since there's already a moderate movement there, you say, no, build your nukes. Let's see if you use them. There's no way they will use them. Nukes are those things that are great to build that you never want to have to deploy, and especially because Israel has them. So I don't think that's an unreal threat, in my opinion. Nuclear war is not something I ever would foresee happening.
It's not the fact that they'll use them on like America or Israel or something. I don't think that's the reason that the United States doesn't like Iran having nukes. What it does is it puts them in a better bargaining position within the region, and it undermines the credibility of the United States as a world superpower when this organization, this country that is so hostile to the American interests, is able to basically put themselves on an even playing field in the sense that they also have the means to kill millions of people. You know, it makes the United States less in a position to basically play chess in the region, and that's what they don't want. It's another way for the region to lose control of the region in general and lose control of resources. I mean, I doubt that there's any person at the Pentagon who thinks that if Iran gets one nuclear warhead, that they're going to blow up Israel or something.
No, I think the only person that thinks that is Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah. All right, so we got to wrap up here. Before we get to our soapbox, we have one final question. Someone wasn't able to call in. They want to know, team pancake or team sausage? Breakfast. Are you going team pancake?
Sausage.
Or are you going meats, or are you going breads in the morning?
The only response to that question could be bacon.
I'm going team meats.
Yeah.
I will honestly say that I eat 2 Eggo waffles for breakfast in the morning because it's easy almost every day. But I would prefer bacon, eggs, sausage, hash browns, or anything from Cracker Barrel. So,
have you ever been to Man's Road Grill back home?
No, it sounds good though.
No, so they're one of those. There's a place like that out here where you can get for $7 a breakfast platter, and it is literally probably half of a cow worth of meat on this breakfast platter, and it's on top of it is three or four fried eggs, and they're just laid, and it's mixed in with peppers, and oh my god, it is the best breakfast of all time, and it's got so much bacon. It's unreal.
There's a place called Flapjacks here in Indianapolis, and you get one of their skillets, and it's meats and cheeses and peppers and onions and potatoes, and so good. It's just like half a cow. So, all right. It's only taken us 60 episodes to come up with a name. I always, at the end of the show, we say, hey, did you forget anything? Is there anything you want to plug, any of that? We're going to call it the Soapbox. Genius, right, Greg?
Genius.
So get on your soapbox. Tell us what you want to rant about, what you want to promote, anything that you'd like to tell us. Let's go with Creighton Harrington first.
So I guess if you're listening to this podcast and you you want to get involved you're in school and you want to get involved on your campus in promoting these ideas, then give me a holler, because I work for Young Americans for Liberty. So I have to definitely use this moment to promote the organization, which is not affiliated with this podcast in any way, shape, or form.
Actually, they
other than direct funding.
Yeah, they direct
and full support.
Full support. Sign off on every podcast.
But yeah, so if you want to be involved on your campus, then definitely give me a holler at the website, wearelibertarians.com, and I can hook you up. But other than that, I don't really have much to announce, although I do have an awesome quote, if I can find it, that was from a TV show that is currently running, but I can't find the text. Either way,
thrilling radio.
The quote is, "Everything that happened before July 4th, 1776 was a mistake. History was a mistake before July 4th, 1776. Ron fucking Swanson."
There we go. There we go.
All right, Creighton, we're going to hang up on you because of the hum, but we appreciate you.
Is that me?
Yeah, it's you.
It sounds like you guys are at the beach.
It's all that liberty just pouring off of you.
Your electricity just is frying the wires.
Yeah.
So, all right, man, we'll have fun.
Yeah, good talking to you, buddy.
Bye-bye. All right, cool. All right, anything you want to say, plug, any of that good stuff?
I just wanted to say, I'd mentioned it earlier, that Rodney Balco book, I was never one that has been engaged much in the militarization of the police or what was going on. In the videos that he showed us and the narrative he presented that in, my eyes opened. Yeah. I had no idea the level we were at. So if you're even remotely curious about it, really go look at his book and give it a read, because it is astounding what is happening.
And it's Radley Balco.
Radley.
Not Rodney.
Well,
he gets no respect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't even know what I want to plug or promote. I guess I would say go to wal-radio.com. Get all the podcasts there. You can hear Radley Balco give his lecture at IU. So if you don't like to read, you can listen to it. Hear some of the facts and all the stuff that he talked about. And hey, I'm getting ready to do a podcast with Gina. So Gina, we said 2 o'clock. It's now 2:12. I said, hey, are you going to Skype in? And she said, yeah, at 2. Oh, different time zones. Hold on, let me put on clothes and I'll be right with you. She's just a regular nut. So it should be good. She's in New Orleans and some things happened and she's paranoid and I'm going to delve into it. So check out Storytime with Gina. All right, thank you for joining us. We're so glad to be back. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you like the call-in feature, let us know, and maybe we'll do more of it. So thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Even though it was a decent show, we promise to do
better next time.
Music for We Are Libertarians is provided by Hoosier musician Brian Keith Wallen. Please check out his website, briankeithwallen.com. The song is Bad Spell.